welcome everyone to this call. My name is Sebastian Ferse, and I have the pleasure to moderate this information session about the third MeerWissen call for proposals on nature-based solutions on behalf of the MeerWissen initiative. I would like to ask everyone on the call to please mute your mics at this point, because otherwise it will be difficult to follow the session. So my name is Sebastian Ferse. I'm moderating the call. I'm also a co-author of the guidance on co-designing collaborative research projects commissioned by MeerWissen that will be presented later by my colleagues at a later point in this information session. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our online audience, in particular to the distinguished speakers that are joining us. Today, we would like to inform you about the MeerWissen funding program, the third call for proposals on nature-based solutions in particular, and the guidelines for co-designing joint marine research projects in a dedicated co-design phase prior to project implementation. This event is organized by the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or GIZ, which hosts the MeerWissen Secretariat on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. Our agenda today covers 4 parts. In the opening session following now, we will hear about the background of the MeerWissen program and the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, to which it contributes. In part 2, we will cover the technical aspects of the call, including a question and answer session. Following the closing remarks in part 3, we will have an informal opportunity to meet potential collaborators. Now, a few housekeeping remarks. I've already mentioned, please remain muted unless you're presenting, and make use of the chat to ask questions. We will revert to these questions in the chat in the question and answer session later on, where you can also ask questions directly. This session, I have to inform you, is being recorded, and it will be made publicly available from tomorrow on. And by joining this session, you agree to the recording. But you will not appear in the recording unless you turn on your camera and use the microphone. So please be cautious about this during the call. I would like now to give the floor to Ms. Silke Spohn, Head of the Program Conservation and Biodiversity at GIZ, who will introduce the MeerWissen initiative.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Well, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome everyone joining this information session on the new and third call for proposals of the MeerWissen initiative on behalf of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or let's say it in short, GIZ. My name is Silke Spohn, as Sebastian just said, and I'm head of the program Conservation of Biodiversity, in which the initiative MeerWissen had its origin. GIZ facilitates this initiative on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ in short. In case you haven't come across GIZ before, it's an enterprise owned by the German federal government. We support our government to achieve its objectives in international cooperation for sustainable development. And in the realm of marine conservation, this means that we support partners at national, regional, and global levels in their efforts to protect and sustainably manage marine and coastal ecosystems and to achieve the goals and targets of the Convention on Biodiversity and Agenda 2030, in particularly on SDG 14. The critical importance of marine and coastal biodiversity for sustainable development and human well-being cannot be stressed enough and must be placed higher on the political agenda. So the ocean is our largest ecosystem, teeming with wildlife of unimaginable biodiversity. It is also our ally in stabilizing the climate and absorbing carbon dioxide. So it directly supports human well-being and thus does not only depend on us for its proper management and use, but we depend on the ocean. Coastal ecosystems such as coral reefs, mangrove forests, or seagrass beds play a significant role in coastal protection, climate adaptation, and mitigation, but also for food security in the livelihoods of coastal communities. as so-called nature-based solutions, actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore such ecosystems can therefore contribute to tackle urgent societal challenges. These actions must be rooted in sound scientific knowledge and information, and their potential and limitations so roughly explored in order to be able to effectively harness nature for sustainable development. Our initiative, MeerWissen, invites you to become part of this quest for solutions at the nexus between ocean, biodiversity, climate, and human well-being, for funding a new round of partnership projects between African and German marine scientists that will inform political decision-making in African partner countries. This call for proposals is dedicated to improving the knowledge base for marine and coastal nature-based solutions and their use and uptake in national strategies and action plans. So it's my great pleasure now to officially declare this call as launched and to motivate all participants to share this call within their networks. We are very happy that this call has been developed as a contribution to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And we look forward to welcoming African and German marine research institutes respond to their call and will be happy to receive their project ideas focusing on nature-based solutions to unlock innovative ocean science solutions. So thank you very much, and I wish you a lot of success.
Thank you, Silke Spohn, for introducing GIZ and the MeerWissen initiative to us and for officially launching it. We'll now hear a welcome note from Dr. Heike Hen, Director for Climate Policy, Energy, Urban Development and Environment, and Commissioner for Climate Policy and Climate Financing at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, or BMZ.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear marine scientists, a healthy ocean is key for biodiversity, food security, and our greatest ally against climate change. The ocean is enormously important for economic development and sustainable livelihoods in the coastal states of Africa. Coastal ecosystems such as mangrove forests and seagrass meadows stabilize shorelines, prevent erosion, act as effective CO2 sinks, and provide protection against strong waves and storm surges. By protecting, managing, and restoring them, we are developing nature-based solutions to urgent global and local challenges. Rising temperatures and sea levels, polluted acidic waters, and disappearing ecosystems and species show us our ocean is not healthy. Our planet and humanity are at risk. Therefore, we have to scale up our commitments to a healthy ocean and be faster, more efficient, and more effective. We definitely need science-based policies to enable effective SDG 14 implementation and to achieve the goals of the future global biodiversity framework under the Convention on Biological Diversity. One key element in our efforts to contribute to achieving SDG 14 Life Below Water is MeerWissen, an initiative that since 2018 supports cooperation between African and German marine scientists to improve the basis of information for political decision makers, to provide tailored, up-to-date and accurate science-based information, to effectively protect and manage marine resources and foster the dialogue around the conservation and sustainable use of Africa's ocean and coasts. The German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, welcomes the continued progress made by this initiative in its 12 projects in 7 African countries. And even in times of the COVID-19 pandemic, this collaboration was possible. For example, the Fishing Data East Africa project has successfully linked policymakers and research institutes with the fishery sector through the support of local and regional partnerships, such as the Western Indian Ocean Marine Science Association and the UN Food and agriculture organization. Colleagues, we want this success story to continue, which is why I'm very pleased that we are formally launching today the third call for proposals. With this call, we want to strengthen the knowledge base for marine and coastal nature-based solutions in Africa by making available up to 360,000 euros per project in African partner countries. We take a further step towards increasing the resilience of certain coastal ecosystems and enhancing the livelihood of the most vulnerable people, communities, and regions. The projects will be led by African and German scientific institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming 10 years are crucial for a healthy ocean. With the MeerWissen initiative, the BMZ contributes to the goals of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And I'm pleased to be able to launch this call today for proposals in collaboration with the IOC UNESCO Secretariat. In line with the objectives of the decade, we place particular emphasis on co-designing research, not only among the partnering research institutions, but also with non-academic stakeholders and decision makers. We hope that the knowledge generated in this process will directly address local needs and feed into solutions for sustainable development. Therefore, we look forward to welcoming scientific institutions' interest in joining MeerWissen's call to contribute to the science that is needed to conserve, sustainable, manage, and restore marine biodiversity for future generations, while improving the lives of local people today.
Thank you to Dr. Heike Hen for these remarks, which nicely illustrate how the MeerWissen projects link knowledge to application by pursuing a co-design approach, which we will hear more about. It's also great to see that Dr. Hen wants to see the success story of MeerWissen to continue and that the BMZ has scaled up their commitment to a healthy ocean. We've also heard about the UN Oceans Decade. And one element that increases the gravity of this third call is its endorsement as a contribution to the UN Ocean Decade, and successful projects will be endorsed as decade actions and thus formally recognized as part of the UN Ocean Decade. And thus it's my pleasure to give the floor now to Alison Clausen, Program Specialist at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, who will introduce the Ocean Decade in more detail.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and it's a real pleasure to be here today with you all. I see many familiar names and faces in the participant list, so it's a real pleasure. As maybe if we can move on to the first slide of the presentation, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the Ocean Decade. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but perhaps to highlight a few elements of the decade that are particularly relevant for the MeerWissen initiative and our collaboration. You know, we at IOC UNESCO are the coordinating agency of the Ocean Decade, where we're coordinating the decade on behalf of the UN system, but it really is everyone's decade, and we're really aiming for wide, broad participation across different geographies, across different communities, the scientific community, user communities, and so on. So co-design is obviously an essential part of the decade. And that's why we're so thrilled that the MeerWissen initiative is now an official contribution to the decade, because I think we share many of the same priorities, many of the same aims and ambitions for the next 10 years. So the Ocean Decade is really a framework. It's a framework to convene actors in co-design to develop the science we need for the ocean we want. And it's really about transformative ocean science. It's about science that is focused on solutions for sustainable development and that connects people and the ocean. And so it's really science, again, that is co-designed, that brings together scientific communities, policymakers, governments, decision makers, managers, and the users of science to identify the most pressing ocean knowledge needs, to generate the information, the data, the knowledge, the science, and then to use that in policy decision making, in management, through various applications and services. So it really focuses along the entire ocean science value chain and has a very strong emphasis on inclusivity, diversity, equity, and ensuring that no one is left behind over the next decade. Now, this very lofty ambition will be achieved by a vast number of what we call decade actions, which are decade programs or projects or activities at different scales that will be developed by partners around the world and submitted for official endorsement as part of the Ocean Decade. So you can see in the graphic on the right-hand side of this slide, the decade actions really form the foundation of how we are going to achieve change over the next 10 years. They will align to the different decade objectives, which are about identifying, generating, and using knowledge. And they will contribute to one or more of 10 Ocean Decade challenges. And these are the 10 big challenges that the Ocean Decade has identified as being essential to be able to contribute to the 2030 agenda and other policy frameworks. And many of these challenges are directly relevant to the MeerWissen initiative's priorities. There are challenges focused on resilience, on multiple ocean stresses, on ecosystems, on ocean climate nexus, on capacity development, just to name a few. And we envisage that many of the initiatives coming through, or many of the projects coming through the MeerWissen initiative that contribute to the decade, will contribute directly to those challenges. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So the way in which these actions are going to be identified for the decade is through regular calls for decade actions. And we just launched on Friday the second call for decade actions, of which the MeerWissen initiative is an integral part. Now, this call for decade actions actually contains a number of components in addition to the MeerWissen initiative. So it's looking at global programs, it's looking at different types of projects, but the MeerWissen initiative is really central to this because it is a part of the call for decade actions where the German government has committed resources to funding projects that will both be funded by the MeerWissen initiative and, as Dr. Hein said, also endorsed as decade actions, which means that they go simultaneously having the status of being part of the MeerWissen initiative, but also becoming an official part of the Ocean Decade ecosystem, which means that there will be access to new partnerships, to new collaborations, to communities of practice that are emerging throughout the decade. And we also hope that these initiatives will be able to inform, share experiences, educate and advise other decade actions throughout the world on their experiences with co-design, with nature-based solutions. So it's really bringing these decade actions into the Ocean Decade ecosystem, the Ocean Decade world, the Ocean Decade family, if you like, to become part of this global movement, which is really putting ocean knowledge front and center of the sustainable development question. If we can move on to the next slide, please. A key thing for you to think about as you're submitting your ideas for the MeerWissen initiative and therefore as part of the call for decade actions under the Ocean Decade is we'd really like to encourage you to become part of the Ocean Decade Global Stakeholder Forum. This is already, I think, a great starting point for you to learn more about the Ocean Decade, and also potentially to find partners, to find ideas, to find other groups that you can work with as you're bringing your ideas together for submission to the MeerWissen initiative. It's a very new forum. It was only launched last week as a soft launch, so we're still getting the final tweaks and bugs ironed out of it. But I really encourage you all to join up. I think it could be a very valuable resource as you're developing ideas for your projects, and as I said, to learn more about the Ocean Decade and things that are happening in other parts of the world. There are a number of communities of practice there. There are national and regional groups which are being established. There's information on decade activities and decade actions that are already underway, and we hope that you find it an inspiring and engaging and a collaborative space that is useful for you. And I've put the links there on that slide for you to be able to join up. So in closing, I hope that gives you an overview of the Ocean Decade, the importance of the Ocean Decade for the UN system and beyond. Again, a huge thanks and gratitude to the MeerWissen Initiative for becoming part of the decade, for being an official contribution. We strongly encourage you all to learn more about the decade. Send your proposals in to the MeerWissen Initiative, and we look forward to working with you in coming years as we all work together to build the ocean we want by 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison, for the information and insights. This is really inspiring to see where everything fits in and what the MeerWissen project can contribute to in the bigger picture. So this concludes our opening session, and we've now learned where the whole MeerWissen initiative is coming from and how it fits in. And we hope that we have started to generate sufficient appetite for you to really think about ideas and get ready to write proposals. And thus we get to the second part, the input session, where we will learn just how to do that. And for that, I would like to welcome Alexandra van Hoek and Ron Flügel, advisors in the Marine Conservation Program at GIZ, who will set the scene for the next session.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Alex. I work for GIZ, and let me start by briefly introducing the initiative MeerWissen. So in 2018, this initiative was launched by BMZ, acknowledging the importance of science and policy working more closely together. The name MeerWissen is actually a pun, it's a word play. Meer in German means both ocean, but spelled with an H. It also means more. And Wissen is knowledge, so it's both ocean knowledge and more knowledge. GIZ was commissioned by BMZ to administer the initiative by acting as its secretariat. Both BMZ and GIZ believe that a close collaboration with marine research is key to provide decision makers at both policy and management level with up-to-date and accurate science-based information. So that is effectively to protect and manage marine resources. However, that information and data is often unavailable and inaccessible or outdated. So against this backdrop, MeerWissen was developed. The objective of MeerWissen is based on 3 pillars and can be summarized in the statement at the top. So improving the conditions for knowledge and science-based policymaking for the conservation and sustainable use of the ocean in selected African countries by, and those are the 3 pillars, so strengthening capacities, stimulating dialogue, and fostering digital solutions. The funding program for partnership project is at the core of the MeerWissen initiative, and so far 2 calls have been made. Logically, this is the 3rd one. Each of them has resulted in 6 projects, and this means that there's a total of 12 projects now in 7 African countries, each with a duration of 2 years. The co-design approach is also at the core of the MeerWissen initiative. We believe that the partnership is really important and think that that will increase ownership and is based on a joint vision. I won't say too much about this now, just for a background. We used to have just a workshop before the start of the projects, 3-day workshops where at least one partner would join, one project partner. This would help reflect on the project, but also strengthen the MeerWissen community. And speaking of the MeerWissen community, this is a group for all the projects that are being funded. And it includes webinars, recently podcasts, and we also sometimes create products together, such as the Codesign discussion paper, which was then published through the Nairobi Convention. These things we're really proud of and want to encourage further. Also, we learned from the past 2 calls that the co-design approach needed to be improved. We wanted to include it into the funding framework and also keep it a bit flexible, which leads me now to the 3rd call. Sorry. Yes, so the 3rd call on marine nature-based solutions. Its goal is to improve the knowledge base for marine and coastal nature-based solutions and facilitate their use and inclusion in national strategies and action plans. I put the timeline here for reference. So we start with the application, which has already begun. Deadline is December, and then we'll have the co-design phase from 6 to 9 months. This is the flexibility that we talked about earlier. And then the implementation will roughly commence in March of 2023, so 2 years from now, and then will last 2 years until March 2025, March, February. The objectives of MeerWissen. So, of course, we have the thematic focus on nature-based solutions, which my colleague Ron will talk more about. And then we have 4 other objectives. There is 1, the co-design and partnership of equals. We want to see all partners have an active commitment as a prerequisite, actually, for participating in the MeerWissen funding program. So this means you work at eye level, you jointly set priorities, and that the outcomes really meet local needs and can be used by all partners. Then we look at capacity development. So we want capacities on institutional and individual level for all project partners. We expect that they are according to the needs, of course, and the potentials of the partners involved. Then science policy. Well, the results and the knowledge generated through MeerWissen projects can then be used and should be translated into evidence-based political decision-making for coastal development. And last but not least, data innovation and technology. As I mentioned earlier, the backdrop against MeerWissen was developed. So we want to see improved access to data and information and enhanced databases and or promotion of the harmonization of data to support the knowledge-based decision-making. Progress or maintenance continues even after project ends. So that's important as well for the projects to keep in mind. So the two-phased approach. You start with a co-design phase of 6 to 9 months. This is up to the projects, and they should commence in June next year. The budget for this phase is roughly 50 to 80,000. Funding modality, that's important to keep in mind, only 1 grant will be given with all the funds to the acting coordinator, just for the co-design phase. And we expect in-kind contributions by all partners, though, that are involved. On the implementation side, then, afterwards, we have 2 years, starting at the latest in March. If your co-design phase is shorter, it will start earlier. The budget is roughly 360,000, but this includes the money for the co-design phase. Funding modality is up to 3 grants for the main project partners. We will, depending on the situation, allow forwarding of funds, but this should not be necessarily part of your, it shouldn't be required from you to do your projects for this to happen. So look at the main project partners. And we want to see an MOU that then governs the joint decision-making. Eligible countries. We have a list here of all the countries that should be focus of this MeerWissen call. So check if the country you want to work at is on this list. Over to you, Ron.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Okay, so when we talk about marine nature-based solutions, what do we actually understand under this term? I mean, we had heard a couple of times that coastal ecosystems play an important role for coastal populations, and also communities by offering a variety of ecosystem services. And besides protecting the coast from strong waves, storm surges, preventing erosion, they also provide food, income, and are of important cultural value for many coastal communities. Also, as so-called blue carbon ecosystems, mangroves and seagrass beds also act as effective CO2 sinks. Nature-based solutions, as we also know by now, is an umbrella concept introduced specifically to promote nature as a tool to help address societal challenges like food security, climate change, or disaster risk management, whilst at the same time benefiting biodiversity. So nature-based solutions also increasingly feature in international and national policies, programs, such as, for example, the Paris Agreement, also the related national determined contributions, the NDCs, and also the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction. So also it is discussed in context of the ongoing discussions for the Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, and the Convention of Biodiversity, and a lot of negotiations are going on regarding that term and also with regard to the definition. But it also shows this enormous potential, actually, to build bridges between all these different framework conventions, but also with regard of bringing together the climate discussions and the biodiversity discussions. So for BMZ's engagement regarding marine nature-based solutions, it should also be mentioned that through this call and also other projects, BMZ focuses on the conservation, sustainable management and restoration of natural and modified marine and coastal ecosystem as a solution for societal challenges. Next slide, please. So let's talk about how in this call we understand nature-based solutions. We all know that there are still a lot of discussions going on regarding the specific definitions. So on EU level, there's a different definition, and there are a lot of people discussing this topic. But for us in this call, we refer to the definition of IUCN as actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. Next slide, please. So what is actually the objective of this call? The objective is to improve the knowledge base for marine and coastal nature-based solutions in Africa and to facilitate their use and uptake in national strategies and action plans. Next slide. So the question now is, in which direction should the proposals go? So what are we actually looking for? We want to get a better understanding of marine and coastal biodiversity and ecosystems and their functioning in nature-based solutions. Also, we want to see or find out how nature-based solutions can be measured, or also how they are actually connected to each other, and how they then can serve as a solution to local societal challenges. Observing and understanding the causalities between different coastal marine ecosystems and their role as potential NBS is also something that is for us very interesting to look at not only one ecosystem, but how they are actually all connected and how they then be a solution for the coastal communities. Next slide, please. So predicting the potential impacts of nature-based solution in different sectors on local communities and social ecological systems is something that should be focused on in your applications or in your proposals. And a last step, but very important in context of the whole concept of the MeerWissen initiative, is also the uptaking of scientific findings into the political processes, such as national strategies, implementation plans, or adaptation strategies. Next slide. So the question is, what solutions for what, and how marine nature-based solutions could be explored in the context of societal challenges they're intended to address. Therefore, embedding the proposed project ideas into an overall societal context is of particular importance for us. Thank you. Alex, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Ron. Now, you might be wondering, well, how are you evaluating the proposals? Well, first, let me know none of these criteria are pass-fail. We will grade on a scale, and the best projects will win. So we do hope to see your proposals reflect all of these criteria. And those are thematic focus and political and social relevance is highlighted. So is there a concrete need for policy development that is met in your in the field of marine and coastal nature-based solutions? And also please explicitly identify the contribution to SDGs. Then, of course, the contribution to the overarching objectives of MeerWissen that I mentioned earlier and the UN Ocean Decade. All of those details, by the way, you can find in the manual, so I'll keep this short. But if you have further questions, also contact us. Right, then reflect the partnership of equals. So we want to see sort of joint commitments and an equality within your partnership, reflecting in sort of actions and roles and responsibilities. Then gender and generational equality, of course, pursue diversity and make sure you foster those aspects. Plausibility of project logic, quality of proposal for co-design phase, and sustainability of project impacts and outputs are all pretty straightforward. And again, we'll grade it on a scale, and the best projects will win. So aim to reach those criteria to the best of your abilities and consider them thoroughly in your projects, in your proposals. Now, the next steps, after you've submitted your application by December 31st this year, we'll have an assessment of the selection, and we will communicate this by end of February to all the projects that have made it through. And then the co-design will commence in June. We need a few months to prepare the contracts. That's the waiting between February and June. So the co-design phase will then go from 6 to 9 months, depending on the project needs. And then important to keep in mind, by November, if you aim for the 9 months, otherwise earlier, you need to submit the full proposal for the 2 years. That we then receive, and we also need to set up the grants for the other 2 project partners, if they are 2. If there's only 1, that's all right as well. The minimum are 2 partners per project, 1 German, 1 African. And then the partnership project will begin by the latest in March, or otherwise a bit earlier, and last 2 years, as mentioned before. So here, just a quick checklist. There are 4 things you need to submit. The application template, which you can find on all of this, you can find on the website, just for references. A budget table for the co-design phase, that will be more detailed. A checklist on legal and commercial eligibility for all of the main partners, and a cooperation agreement tying all of you together. And keep in mind, per project, per partnership project, this needs to just happen once. So you don't need to submit 3 application templates for the same project. And again, deadline is 31st of December. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you, Alex and Ron, for the details on the 3rd MeerWissen call. We will now follow a little bit further on the specific guidelines for co-design. And I would like to introduce Rebecca Lahl and Marie Fujitani from the Leibniz Center for Tropical Marine Research, or ZMT. Rebecca heads ZMT's Office for Knowledge Exchange, and Marie is a research group leader at ZMT and also a professor of geography at the University of Bremen. Now, ZMT was commissioned by MeerWissen Secretariat to develop guidance on co-designing collaborative marine research projects, which we will now hear more about. And we will in parallel launch this guideline on the website, so you can also download it. Rebecca and Marie co-authored the guidance based on a literature review and earlier discussion paper on co-design that was elaborated within the existing MeerWissen community with inputs from participants of a co-design workshop that was conducted as part of an ocean lab of the UN Ocean Decade in July this year and based on own experience. The floor is yours, Rebecca and Marie.
Great, thank you very much, Sebastian. So hi, welcome to the session on the guidance for planning and conducting co-design. As mentioned in the previous session by Alexandra, the proposal consists of a joint project application consisting of a concept and rough budget outline for a joint 2-year scientific cooperation project and a detailed proposal and budget for a 6 to 9 month co-design phase by the end of the year. Next slide, please. The co-design phase is meant to foster a strong partnership approach where project partners jointly set priorities and outcomes meet local needs and can be used by all partners, relevant stakeholders, and decision makers. So as you can see on the timeline, the funded co-design phase occurs prior to finalization of concepts and project implementation. But you may be asking yourself, why the emphasis on co-design? What do you mean by co-design anyway? And importantly, if one has no background on co-design, how can you go about designing your co-design phase? Next slide, please. These questions and more have motivated the development of a guidance on conducting co-design in the framework of the MeerWissen call. In this session, we'll introduce you to the document and how one can use it as a resource to plan your co-design phase. So as Sebastian said, this document draws from diverse sources, including discussions from an online workshop earlier this year, feedback from previous MeerWissen cohorts and past co-design workshops within MeerWissen, existing guidebooks for research partnerships and stakeholder engagement, literature, both academic and gray from science, as well as development cooperation, and the MeerWissen community worked on a discussion paper that was successfully tabled to the Nairobi Convention to Science to Policy platform. And so from all these sources, the guidance has been constructed with the particular context of the MeerWissen program in mind. And this document is meant to be a living document that builds on the experience of its users. Next slide, please. So we begin with 3 main takeaways from the guidance. What is co-design, why we need it, and what are essential elements? So co-design, what is it? It's part of a family of concepts that are used analogously to co-creation or knowledge co-production, and thus can encompass co-production and co-dissemination. However, in these guidance documents, we focus on the initial phase of the project process, in which researchers and non-academic partners jointly develop a research project and define research questions that meet their collective interests and needs. However, though the co-design phase on this timeline has a clear start and end point, and the guidance is written aimed at this phase, we emphasize that for a successful project, the principles and activities of co-design are relevant throughout, and the process is meant to be iterative and ongoing. Next slide, please. So then why co-design? The MeerWissen initiative is aiming to support a new kind of science that supports societal transformation. So this is not meant to be your usual research project. Here, the emphasis is placed on partnership and societal impact. Co-design draws on diverse sources of knowledge and targeted co-developed lines of inquiry in order to be relevant to a particular context for improved policy decisions and lasting project impacts. Co-design of research also aims to increase equity in the research process, avoiding parachute science and strengthening local ownership. So to paraphrase Moser 2016, the co-design process itself is an instrument of transformation, changing not only the research projects, but the people involved as well, while inviting critical reflection on the role of science in society. To achieve this, projects need sufficient time and resources for planning, team building, and stakeholder engagement. Next slide, please. So here we see a nice grouping of elements of co-design that were highlighted by the participants in the co-design workshop earlier this year. So here we see many elements such as trust, openness, transparency, communication, and respect. But how do we develop these things? And so this question brings us to the second part of the guidance text. Next slide, please. So in an effort to make the co-design process accessible and tractable, we break it down to highlight 4 key areas to focus on. And these 4 areas have emerged from the source materials as essential themes in co-design. And they are joint vision and common understanding, stakeholder engagement, project and partnership management, and sustainability, that is, longevity of the project outcomes. Next slide, please. And so now here's an overview of how to use the guidance. All 4 parts of the guidance have the same structure with key icons that can help you find what you're looking for. So for each of the 4 areas of focus, the guidance gives a definition and describes why it is important. And then it defines concrete steps between 3 to 7 steps that break it up into tangible tasks or work packages. It will then also name concrete tools that you can apply and factor into your own co-design phase. Experience from workshops, consultation, and the literature is factored into helpful tips. And the guidance also gives examples, for example, in these blue boxes, and provides reflective questions in these orange boxes for your team to discuss. And now I hand it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Marie. And with the next slide, please. So with this guidance, we want to help you structure your thinking. These 4 parts of the guidance each have a different focus. So firstly, we are looking into what is the direction or the problem that you want to tackle. What is this project for and where do you want to go? With the second part, we are looking into stakeholder engagement on with whom and how will you work during your project implementation. The third part is about your partnership. How do you want to work with one another? And the fourth is about how you can create a lasting impact on the environment and society. So with this guidance, we want to set your minds for co-design and also provide you with a roadmap to co-design. But this does not mean that it's a linear process following these 4 parts, but it is indeed that these steps are necessarily iterative and ongoing. So we hope that this guidance provides structure that will boost and not inhibit your creativity and help you guide you through this process, maybe also help you, for example, with budgeting your proposal. So now I give a very brief overview of each of the 4 parts. Next slide, please. So where do you want to go? The first part is really about creating a joint positive image of the future with your partners and preferably also with a set of stakeholders, for example, from practice. It's about challenging your initial project idea to create something meaningful and acceptable for all. On the right, you can see an example of a participatory model that was created by representatives from different stakeholder groups in order to share their assumptions of a system transparently so it can be discussed. It's an example that we took from a stakeholder workshop. The purpose is to put out assumptions about a system and how it works, to make it comparable. And this is an example of a tool that can be used to foster, to come to a common understanding or explore the joint vision. Next slide, please. So the second part is about stakeholder engagement. There's actually a lot of literature about how to engage stakeholders. And this part of the guidance is really a state-of-the-art collection. So it starts with identifying a wide set of stakeholders and then understanding more about the framework, conditions, and understanding your stakeholders, analyzing them, and prioritizing them, how relevant they are for your project and their outcomes, and then also strategizing on how you can best engage stakeholders with what tools and what timing and so on. So here on the right-hand side, I also provided an example of a stakeholder mapping that was done during a MeerWissen co-design workshops. The participants write down the stakeholders and position them within this map of importance to the project. Next slide, please. The third part focuses on the, so to say, modus cooperandi of your partnership. How can you build trust, foster mutual learning, while also making sure that responsibilities are clear and acceptable for all? The main takeaway for me was that it's really important to schedule quality time with your partners while also stipulating rules and procedures. On the right-hand side, there's an example also taken from a co-design workshop where participants defined rules for communication, for giving and receiving feedback. This simple exercise can be so helpful to foster appreciative communication. Next. The fourth part of this guidance covers steps that you can take even before the project starts that set the course for sustainability. So meaning that the project outcomes can be secured and have impact, how you can address potential adverse effects to the environment, and also how you can support equity in your partnership, for example, through fair contracting or also by developing a fair budget. And how also you can share benefits of your partnerships. These may be the innovation that you created, the results, the publications, or access to networks. These are all benefits that are best shared amongst the partners. On the right-hand side, you can see also an example from a workshop where participants developed a policy uptake strategy to support uptake of the project results. Next slide, please. So we provide the structure as a jumping off point, and then next slide, please. You can draw from it according to your specific needs and the context that you're working in. And you can fill in these boxes with your own pictures, with your experience, stories. And we invite you in the future to share your lessons with us using this guidance and contribute to it as a living and growing resource, working on a version 2 of this co-design guide. Next slide, please. I think we're done, and I thank you in the name of the authors, Marie, Sebastian, and myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca and Marie, for introducing this guideline. As I'm sure that the information that's contained there in the principle of co-design, the steps are perhaps something that's unusual or new to several of the participants of the call. We also wanted to have the opportunity to hear from practical experience and lessons learned from previous MeerWissen projects where co-design was already part. So we would like to hear from 2 participants in the project Coastal Ecosystem Monitoring in Cabo Verde. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Corinne Almeida, biological oceanographer and a professor at the Institute of Engineering and Marine Sciences at the Atlantic Technical University of Cabo Verde, and Dr. Heino Fock, who is a fisheries biologist at the Thünen Institute of Sea Fisheries in Bremerhaven.
So, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in this the launch of call of the third call of the MeerWissen initiatives. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Please, you can move to slides. Okay, so this, as was mentioned, we have a project and still in implementation that is coastal ecosystem monitoring in Cape Verde that is being done in partnership with institutions here in Cape Verde and in Germany, like IMAR from Cape Verde, that is Institute of Sea, and the Thünen Institute, as mentioned here. Next, please. This coastal ecosystem monitoring, so the aim is to elaborate a program, to develop a program of for coastal monitoring that until the moment we don't have, we have some monitoring activities here in Cape Verde, but we don't have a system of coastal monitoring. So the idea is to develop some activities on coastal monitoring, and based on the results of this coastal monitoring activities, so we will develop a system to be implemented in the future here in Cape Verde for coastal monitoring. So our first step was a co-design workshop in order to develop this plan, the study plan, the plan of the studies that we will intend to put in, that we started already to put in place. This workshop was held, you can move to next slide please, in 2020, November 2020. So the idea, this workshop was divided in these four steps. In the first moment, we invited some researchers around the world, from South Africa to Portugal, Germany, Brazil, and so on. So this that have experience in coastal monitoring, so they share with all of us, all the, not just the partners, but the local partners that we invited, that we will present later. So all the partners was invited for this first meeting to, so where was sharing the experience on this, of these different researchers. So the thematic was from, for example, using of apps to collect fish data, or subtidal monitoring based on dive and coastal shore monitoring, and so on. So different thematics were presented, and also in microplastic. After that, we had a discussion, so where all the participants put questions in order to enrich their knowledge. So all these first two steps was exactly to put all of us in more or less in the same basis before we start the following work, that is the group works. What's interesting during this discussion that, and it's something that we want to advise, to take to be careful in the choosing of the topics to be presented, because one topic that highlight a lot, that was on microplastics, was not our main topic to develop, but because was so is a new topic, and a lot of people have had interest in this. So the discussion, several times we had to try to refocus our discussion in coastal monitoring, not just in general, but not just focusing microplastic. So our advice that we'd like to share with you is to avoid the topics that we don't have too much interest in, but that they can't be attract people, to avoid to disfocus the discussion. So after that, we organize in groups based in the thematics that we want to focus, that the thematics of the studies that we should develop further. So there are three thematics on, as I mentioned, on fisheries data collection based in mobile tools with an apps, specific apps. Another one was in coastal monitoring based on drones. In another one on marine ecosystems, marine ecosystem pilot study. That in this one we should collect several data, oceanographic data, like chemical, biological data. So these three different thematics. So each group focused in one of these thematics, but in each group we had partners from different areas, and each group was led by at least 1 to 2 main partners in this project. So we had, I forgot to mention that we did this. So we was in just after, so we open the borders, so it was not possible to have travel. So our German partners and all the foreign partners was online. So it was possible to do it online in the pandemic situation. But our all local partners was all in place in the same building. So these groups were distributed so in order that we can achieve our foreign partners in each group, our main local partners also in each group that lead the groups, but having also the local partners that are spread different depending on their in their thematic that are more focused. So in each group, we take care to have one moderator and a secretary. A moderator to the next slide, please. A moderator to control and to permit that to the focus, and the secretary to take notes. In order to keep the focus, also we give some questions in the paper to each group in order to focus. So they along this discussion in groups. We require at least they try to tell us which parameters they for each thematic that they see that would be more proper, that we should work. So about the frequency and so on, the methods to be applied. So we put these several questions in order to keep the focus. At the end, after the finish of this afternoon, when we finish, we did the presentation. Each group, the secretary did the presentation of each group all together. You hear group again and did the presentations. And at the presentations also, all of the people engaged, all the partners engaged, give opinion on the work that was done, and we finalize it. So in order to have to refine this participation. So I finish for now. My colleague Dr. Heine Fock will continue.
Thank you very much, Corinne. And next slide, please. So this is basically now a wrap up. So the take-home messages that we had or that we can give from our experience in SEMCV is, first of all, of course, make sure that you have all relevant societal groups in your stakeholder workshop. And then, as Corinne mentioned, with regards to the microplastic issue that was not originally in the project design, make sure that the discussion remains focused. So this also means that it's not actually a true co-design in some way, but it is a co-design within the limits and the boundaries that is set by the project, was set by the project in this case. So, and then if you have a diversity of research objectives and tasks, please share these among those in taking part in the workshop, so that you can also share responsibilities. And this, in the end, I think, made our workshops so very successful. When you start preparing breakout groups, I think this has now become a common practice also in sessions where online breakout groups are designed and so on. Please make sure that you assign the right people to the right groups, so that you get the expertise that you need in these groups in one place. and they can share the relevant experience they have. Next slide, please. And this is just to make sure or to inform you how diverse the stakeholder or a co-design workshop can be. So you see, first of all, as Corinne mentions, national and local on the one side, foreign partners on the other side. Then you see there is a lot from fisheries science, in this case, university, many faculties, so not only one faculty, of course. Then you see fisheries and private sector, you see government participants, community representatives, very important in many cases, we believe. Then, of course, NGOs, and in most cases, environmental NGOs, also to raise their voice and to give their relevant input here. And then, of course, in coastal states, also very important, the maritime sector, so starting with the Coast Guard, port authorities, and so on, to give also guidance on what is possible in terms of already existing regulations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Corinne and Heino, for these insights and particularly for the lessons learned and the practical experiences. This is very helpful, I think, for the audience as well. And they nicely complement the guidance and the tips that we introduced there. So we would like to conclude the second session with a opportunity for questions and hopefully some answers from our side. So at this point, it's up to the discussants or the members in the audience to ask questions that you may have. We've seen that there is also quite a number of questions already asked in the meeting chat. So I'd like to ask you to please use the raise hand function. I can show this quickly. Raise your hand if you have a question and would like to take the floor, and please also remember to lower your hand again afterwards if you have spoken. Then we will give you the word. Please introduce yourself briefly when you're asking your question, and if possible, also mention whom you're addressing your question to. Again, please also feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We will monitor the chat and answer questions there. And I would also like to mention that there is a section on frequently asked questions on the website where simple questions such as who can apply, how do I find potential partner institutes, how many partners can apply, these are answered there. So please have a look there as well if we don't address your questions here. But I look forward to your questions, and I see that Gabriel has raised his hand. So please briefly ask your question and let us know whom you're asking the question to.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Gabriel Wensude Senior Beto. I'm a lecturer at the University of Lomé, Togo. I'm also the focal point of the IOC UNESCO National Agency in Togo. I was in the process of the decades implementation plans, and I see that this opportunity will be very important very good for the West African countries, for the developments of the knowledge on the marine and coastal ecosystem. During the different presentation, my question is, you talk about the workshop, but I don't know really which workshop is it. What workshop is it? And then when this workshop will be organized, and who can be potential participants of this workshop? Maybe I don't hear really the workshop that is it. Can you specify more about this workshop that you're mentioning every time?
Thank you for this question, Gabriel. I think that's a very important question, and I think that Alex might be in a good position to answer.
Yes, hi, and thank you for your question. I didn't make it clear enough. That's my bad. The workshop is specifically before the implementation takes place, and we also will likely have it before the co-design phase, so roughly in June. But details of the workshop are not known yet, such as the location, for instance. I mentioned that in the previous 2 calls of the MeerWissen funding program, we always had a workshop, so we want to continue that tradition. We will just supplement it with this co-design phase now. Who will be able to participate is a very good question. In the past, we've had at least 1 representative per partnership project. So it could be up to the project you want to do to decide who that person can be. Whether there's a limit on people per project, I'm not really sure yet. And I think these are, small details that we still have to agree upon within the MeerWissen Secretariat. And only projects that will move into this co-design phase, so that have passed the application, will be part of the workshop. So we will inform projects that have made it that far about further steps and such details. But thank you for your question.
Thanks, Alex, for the response. I have next on the list, Maiko Diouf, if you want to ask your question. You may still have to unmute yourself, please. Perhaps in the meantime, so please, Maiko, if you want to ask your question, try to unmute yourself. There is a function for that. In the meantime, I would give the mic to Joanna Wanik of the IOW, and I will refer to Maiko afterwards. Joanna, please ask your question.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk. I'm a physical oceanographer and biogeochemist here at the Institute. And we are looking for a partnership with colleagues from Egypt. If you could help us to establish those partnerships, this would be great. And our main objectives right now are looking on improving the water quality, including waters in rivers and coastal ocean, especially in terms of pollution with emerging pollutants, including microplastic. This might be interesting for some communities around the world, and I know that the interest by the stakeholders is already there. So if in the group is anyone either from Egypt or having good experiences and contacts to Egypt, please give me a call or send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm sure that there may be people in the audience, and I can also refer you to the meet and greet section that we have planned afterwards, where we precisely want to make sure that people who are in the audience and have similar interests find themselves. As you also mentioned, the topics that you're interested in, and as I've seen that there are several people asking about specific topics and whether these are eligible, and also the question of matchmaking has come up. I would like to briefly address Ron to see if he can perhaps say a few words about this.
Yes, thanks, Sebastian. So generally speaking, of course, all different kind of topics and applications are possible, but please also specifically have a look again on the definition of nature-based solutions, because that is actually the framework we are dealing with, and especially the definition of IUCN. So, for example, pollution, unfortunately, is not really a societal challenge defined by IUCN. So if you want to come up with a proposal that focuses really on plastic or other pollution topics, then you really need to find a way how to bring that in context of nature-based solutions. So how can nature be a solution for a societal challenge? So that is in general the question. And as mentioned before, try to really think in that direction and also come up with ideas, even how nature can be a solution to tackle, for example, pollution might be an interesting, innovative approach that we don't even know about. So definitely would be also interesting to see or read about. But generally speaking, really try to have a look again at the definition of IUCN, and then you kind of know in which frame we want to have the applications. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron, for the further explanation. I'm sure that answers questions that several people may have had. If you have further questions, such as on details, please feel also encouraged to send your questions to meerwissen@giz.de, and you also see this on the website. I continue with raised hands. There are a couple. The next on my list, Maikor has lowered the hand again, so I hope that the question was answered. The next on my list is Zafiri. Please ask your question, and in light of the time, please be brief when you're asking your question. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Oh, thank you. So my name is Zafiri Andrew from Tanzania. I'm working with Tanzanian Fisheries Research Institute as a research scientist. My question is very small one. I just want to know if how many projects might be supported per partner country. Is it only one project or multiple projects? Thank you.
Thank you. That's, of course, an important question. Alex, do you perhaps want to give a brief response to that?
Yes, hi, thank you for your question. So we are not very sure yet what the number will be. In the last calls, it was 6 projects that were funded, so not just one. It might be around that number, but we don't want to say that yet because it depends on the quality of the proposals. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And I think there is no specific limit on the number per country. In the end, it's depending on the quality and the content of the individual proposals as well. The next that I have on the list is Hamid Diadiou. If you would like to ask your question, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Diadiou. I call from Dakar. I'm a fisheries biologist. I'm working in aquaculture. I would like to know if a multidisciplinary mangrove project on fish farming, soil recovery, and mangrove reforestation is eligible in your offer. If so, which German institute can support use on this project? My English is not very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. My response to that quickly would be, please stick around for the matchmaking session, because I'm sure that these are interesting topics that can be covered and that there are partners that you can work with. So if you're happy to stick around for that session, I don't know if Alex or Ron want to also say something about finding partners, which is also one of the questions that we're addressing in the frequently asked questions on the website. So Alex and
yes,
Ron,
maybe
you
just shortly. So of course, mangroves is a typical nature-based solutions, as we all know. So of course, mangroves, if you put it in the context of nature-based solutions, is definitely a topic what we would be interested in.
Great, thank you. Trying to get to all the all of the people that are still raising their hand. So I still see that Alan Zambella has raised his hand. If you want to ask your question, please.
Yes, hello, Alan Sambella from Alfred Wegener Institute here in Bremerhaven. I just wanted to give a very quick background. I know time is short, but I'm actually the German delegate to the Intergovernmental Panel on Harmful Algal Blooms, and I've had some, I guess, influence or contribution already to the development of this decadal IOC program. But my specific question is about the possibility of continuing research with countries in Africa. We've had some experience with colleagues in South Africa already, and also in Namibia, in studying the Benguela upwelling system and the role of harmful algal blooms and effects on coastal aquaculture and fisheries. So it's kind of a big deal in terms of biodiversity and in terms of implementing monitoring strategies. My specific question is, how welcome would it be to have, we already have good partnership with South Africa. Unfortunately, our colleague in Namibia recently died of COVID. And so I'm wondering, to what extent would the program welcome bi-national contributions together with Germany? In other words, does it have to be a single country, just South Africa, or could we figure out, since we're talking about a coordinated ecosystem, maybe we should try to have a Namibian and a South African partner? So I don't know to whom to address the question, but somebody should answer.
Thanks, Alan. We've also had a question in the chat on eligible partners and multiple partners, not just from academia, but also outside. So I think that may also be covered when Alex is answering, because I saw she was raising the hand.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for your question. Definitely. So it's not a requirement that it's only one African and one German. It can be two African partners, meaning also they can represent two countries. It would be preferable if the research takes place in just one region, but the Benguela is one region, so that should be fine. And yeah, we have the maximum for grant contracts to 3 main partners. So that would include 1 German and 2 African. That would work just fine. And NGOs are eligible in that as well, as long as they have a strong scientific focus. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I'll take one more question, and then unfortunately we have to come to a close of this session. So I see that Ibrahima Samara is still raising the hand. Please.
Hello, did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have only one or two questions. Suppose that I am actually involving in one MeerWissen project. And can I apply on another on this project? It's my first question. The second question is about suppose that actually in the project that I am involved in, we have some problem, and we see that we cannot do all things that we would like to do in the first project. Is it possible to submit a kind of extension for the ongoing projects? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Alex, do you perhaps want to respond to that? Or Ron, I see Ron is raising the hand.
Yes, thanks, Sebastian. So first question, you are already involved in a MeerWissen project, but in general, your institution or in general also from the country or even in the wider range of the network, you can apply again for sure. But extending an existing one in the new phase, that's unfortunately not possible. I hope that answers.
Thanks, Ron. That was a very, very important point, actually. So unfortunately, we're running out of time to respond to additional questions. So I would please ask you to keep those questions if we haven't been able to address them, and write them either in an email to meerwissen@giz.de, and also please have a look at the website where, again, there are frequently asked questions and you may find your answer there. And again, please stick around for the final part of the session, the informal meet and greet, where you may find topics and partners of interest. So thank you for your questions, and please keep them coming. And thanks for the panel to answer these questions. With that, I would like to come to the closing part of this official session, and hand over for that the word to Christoph Weigelmeier, who's Senior Policy Officer for Marine Conservation at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, or BMZ. The floor is yours, Christoph.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So thanks very much for giving the word to me, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, marine scientists, and current and future MeerWissen partners. First of all, a big thank you for allowing me to be part of today's discussion. It is really, really encouraging to see your enthusiasm. That is an enthusiasm that is sorely needed, I think. As our director, Dr. Hen, said in the beginning, the next 10 years will be crucial, not only for our oceans, but for taking decisive action to halt the loss of biodiversity in general. The ocean decade is also a reminder that the clock is ticking, particularly for our oceans, seas and coasts. But Dr. Hen has also mentioned that the oceans can be our greatest allies against climate change. And I want to say that the ocean, also at BMZ, is really at the core of our efforts for climate action and the protection of biodiversity. And therefore, I think we have a responsibility to do our level best to create a future where we conserve our oceans and still be able to benefit from them, or as Alison has said in the beginning, to create the science we need to have the oceans we want. I think we must seize this opportunity for change here. This call for proposals focusing on marine nature-based solutions is a small but important step to tackle the challenges mentioned before. In order to leverage these solutions, policymakers will need the best knowledge and guidance available on which solutions will actually work. Through good and solid knowledge, you can supply this knowledge and this guidance. I only recently took over my responsibilities here as Senior Policy Officers for Marine Conservation. However, one thing I already learned is that just how comprehensively our ocean affects our societies. And comprehensive problems usually need comprehensive solutions and, above all, cooperation. And I'm therefore convinced that MeerWissen and the projects supported by this call can make an important contribution. It aims to support the creation of solid and applicable knowledge on our oceans and also foster a transfer of knowledge. I hope that as a result of today, we will see new and strengthened scientific partnerships. There are already some, I was really impressed, between Germany and Africa. I have read the guidelines on the co-design with great interest. I think it is a great opportunity to set standards on how research, transformative research, can be developed cooperatively. And I'm very curious to see how this co-design will play out, as I'm sure many of you are as well. MeerWissen, although a small fish in the sea, will contribute to improving ocean science and ultimately, hopefully, improving the ocean's health. But it also depends on you, dear participants, dear scientists, your insights, your expertise, getting it into policy actions, and this will depend ultimately on your project proposals. I hope you have found this session as informative as I have. We are very much looking forward to reading and evaluating your proposals. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Christoph, for these closing remarks, and again also for the support throughout that BMZ is showing to this initiative. I think that is really great to see. So thank you indeed to all the panelists and participants in the session. I found it very informative, and I really look forward to the development of this third call and the projects that will evolve out of it.